Exclusive new information on the Westchester County affordable housing case. You're going to hear it here and only here. Also, Dean Skelos and Sheldon Silver were each convicted of corruption in New York City. But this week, a Supreme Court case about a former Virginia governor could impact both of those cases. Our panel of attorneys are here to hash it all out. Then, two high-profile rape cases on college campuses are making national news. At Stanford, the defendant convicted but only got a 6-month sentence. At Indiana University, the kid spent just a day in jail after accepting a plea deal on 2 rape cases. Why is it so difficult to prosecute cases like these? Also, the Slenderman case. 2 12-year-olds, they're getting tried as adults. They're accused of luring their friend into the woods, then trying to stab her to death. The victim survived in the case. It's reviving the argument about whether or not young kids ought to face adult punishment. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. As you can see, a lot to get to in the next 60 minutes. And we start with exclusive breaking new developments, that in the Westchester affordable housing suit. I want to bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman. He's been following this case since the very beginning, and I'm going all the way back to 2009, and yet another twist today.
And Rich, as you know, this settlement has been a contentious issue for the county ever since Rob Astorino took office as Westchester County executive after the county reached that settlement with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and ever since agreeing to build 750 units of affordable housing and remove barriers to fair housing in the county. Astorino has been objecting to the deal and complaining that HUD has been trying to change the deal and impose more and more requirements on the county. This week, Federal District Judge Denise Coates smacked both Astorino and the county for those complaints, finding that with those complaints, Astorino and the county, quote, sought to undercut public confidence in the consent decree, and that Astorino's public campaign against the deal constituted a, quote, concerted effort to influence public opinion against the settlement and its stated goal of improving communities. What's more, Judge Coates ordered the release of a video deposition given by Astorino last year, where he often comes up short on having answers about his statements in public and county actions and operations related to the settlement when asked by the monitor in the case during that deposition. The release of that video has been delayed until after Astorino and the county have had a chance to appeal. That appeal must be submitted by this coming Tuesday. In a statement given to RNN and FiOS 1, Astorino Communications Officer TJ McCormick says, quote, the county plans to appeal Judge Coates' decision. The decision raises troubling First Amendment questions about the ability of the county executive and other elected officials to speak out about legitimate and documented concerns raised by the behavior of an overreaching federal government, specifically in this case, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Rich?
Andrew, thank you very much. Let's get this. I want to bring in our panel as well. Amy Dardashian is an attorney, a legal analyst, and an Emmy award-winning journalist. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation, and a former ADA out on Long Island. Mayo Bartlett, also former ADA in Westchester County. He's an attorney in the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC. He's also a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at that district attorney's office. All right, Andrew, just to put a point on this for the folks who have seen this, and this became a national story where Astorino going on the Fox News of the world saying that this is Big Brother trying to tell us how we can and can't manage our affairs in a particular county. There's math to this as well. Already, the county has lost out on grants here in excess of $10 million, right?
Yeah.
And potentially, we could be looking at a lot more money down the pike if they not only continue to object to this case, continue to appeal, and if they lose.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different aspects to this case. The first is that the county has to build 750 units of affordable housing, and the county is ahead of schedule in doing that. And that's a point that Astorino and other people for the county often make. The other part of this is a little more nebulous. It has to further fair and affordable housing and remove the impediments to it. That involves things like zoning on the municipal level. So in towns like Harrison, for example, the county is responsible for getting the municipality to remove those zoning barriers.
And the county has repeatedly said, we can't tell towns what to do. And they say, if you, HUD says, if not you, then who?
Right. And in the statement that McCormick wrote or sent to us, they raise a legitimate concern from the county, which is part of the deal for the county is you have to try to advance this process for fair and affordable housing. But at the same time, complaining about those actions they're saying now works against that and is not doing that, is not furthering and advancing fair and affordable housing. There may be a legitimate First Amendment issue here.
To me, Mayo, this always struck me as something far more simple and basic. I remember in this very building moderating a debate with then County Executive Andy Spano and then candidate Rob Astorino. And one of the things that I think led to Andy Spano's eventual defeat was he signed a deal with the federal government where he was going to get a certain package of dollars, and as a consequence, he was going to sign up to create the affordable housing. He, in fact, went to the county legislature and said, you guys got to sign this, otherwise we're going to look like racists. At the end of the day, whether it was a good deal or a bad deal, he signed it. And I remember on that debate stage, Astorino criticizing all the rest, but saying, well, what are we going to do about it? He said, well, a deal's a deal. What are we going to do? In effect, the county, for the last 6+ years, has said, never mind. I don't care. I don't like the deal. We don't think it's fair. We're not going to do it. They've lost a lot of money with it. You can argue they've gotten good or bad press as a consequence. But at the end of the day, in addition to all the legal fees and the mud on the reputation, you can argue, I just don't see how they can win. It's in black and white, pardon the pun, that there's a deal there, and they want to change the deal if they've already agreed to it. Am I oversimplifying?
No, I don't think you are, and it's a deal that they didn't have to agree to, but when you don't agree, you forfeit certain benefits and you're not eligible for certain funds from the federal government. When you sign that contract, you also can give up some of your First Amendment rights, and also a judge is able to actually restrict First Amendment rights, and that happens all the time. Judges have gag orders in cases where they preclude certain parties from making statements. So this is not outside of judicial purview. But when you really come down to it, you're dealing with a county that had brick by brick. We're really infamous throughout the country for what happened in Yonkers in terms of desegregation, and it was featured in Show Me a Hero on HBO. So following in the footsteps of all of these cases.
And if I could, Mayo, just to break it down for the audience who hasn't followed the story, HUD came in and said, time out. You got a bunch of towns here where, forget that there's nobody but white faces right now, you've created impediments or you've created barriers where you will not allow affordable housing. You can't do that. In short, Rob Astorino says, well, I can't tell a county how they're supposed to zone their boundaries. I can't tell them that they have to create affordable housing, theoretically lowering property values of some of the neighboring towns. Forget that there's an agreement in place. Why is he either right or wrong in that argument?
Well, you may not be able to dictate to them, but there are carrots that you have also and sticks that the county has. So the county does give aid to the local municipalities, whether it's your local towns, villages, and cities. And you have to at least show that you've made a good faith effort to do so. So if you've done that and you come back to the judge and say, Your Honor, look, the towns are resistant, then at least you can say you've kept your part of the bargain. Yep. The other issue is this is a False Claims Act case. So it's dealing with the suggestion that the county falsely stated that it was actually doing this work well before it began to do so.
Andrew, on a more basic level, you know every single player here. You know the monitor. You know the folks over at HUD. You certainly know the county executive. You talked to him at length many, many times, and his predecessor, let alone members of the county legislature. Don't we know how this ends? Don't we know that there's an inevitability to this? And why, if we do, are we continuing to drag this out?
Because I think the long game from the Astorino administration has been, let's prolong this as long as we possibly can, particularly when it comes to things like zoning in municipalities and whether you can force the county to force those municipalities into action, potentially to the next presidential election and maybe to a change in the Supreme Court, and maybe appeal this all the way up the ladder. There's also a political benefit to it in that regard for Astorino, who, as you know, was the Republican nominee for governor and envisions himself with a political future in the Republican Party. This is the kind of issue of federal overreach that plays particularly well among Republican voters. And so the politics of this and perhaps the opportunity that maybe down the road he can be the guy who pushed the stone back up the hill against the federal government.
It's kind of an argument a day late and a dollar short, in that he's in one end saying, hey, I'm building them all. I'm on schedule. And then the other hand saying, we shouldn't build all these things. Why is someone forcing us to? Now, forget about the non-impediments and the equity and where they're doing and all the rest. It seems that there's two competing arguments the same person's making at the same time.
Well, there are when it comes to whether we're building the units or not, and then whether we're knocking down these other impediments. And I would offer that this seems to constitute a third argument in this case, that the HUD and the judge are now saying, Rob Astorino, you can't complain about this deal because that undermines people's confidence in it, and so that undermines the entire deal. And now that gives him another chance to sort of shout at Washington and say, wait a minute, you're telling me that I can't speak out against this? I can't offer my concerns to my constituents about this?
Real short, though, how much of this has gotten into the personal, in that I know that there has been, if not mandates, directives, stand down on this, stop doing. And every time there's a public statement on this, every time that there's a delay, every time there's a perceived obfuscation, the feds have it in at this point for the county, and specifically this
federal government and this Department of Housing and Urban Development. Keep in mind, all that could change come January 20th.
But it may stay the same also, and if you lose and that and the False Claims Act case goes forward, we stand to lose tens of millions of dollars. So also we have
there's a consequence.
Absolutely,
to
this. And we have a county executive who basically has made his name on trying to be fiscally responsible. So now, think of what we do to save $50 million each year in a budget, and how that would impact the county in terms of services it wouldn't be able to provide.
Or, God forbid, raising taxes, including those property ones. Andrew, great job. Thank you very much. And I know, of course, Fox will continue to update this story with all the developments. But as I said off the top, you heard it here first. All right, coming up next, Shelley Silver and Dean Skelos, they're heading to prison, right? Well, they were each convicted of corruption, but maybe we shouldn't go so fast. How a Supreme Court case about the corruption conviction of the former Virginia governor is giving their lawyers a glimmer of hope.